Welcome to the Athens Film Festival 2025 Creator Interviews. Today I'm here with Jay Karales, writer, director, and actor in the film Mass State Lottery, showing in the festival this August. Jay, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. How about yourself?
I'm good. I'm glad to be sitting down with you here today. Mass State Lottery, congratulations. Mass State Lottery fuses crime, horror, noir, comedy, a lot of genres that don't always inherently blend together. How did you find the tonal balance for that without losing the gravity of the story?
Wow, that's a really good question. I don't know. I haven't thought about that. Honestly, anytime I approach a project, I just kind of think, I think it's very important to kind of respect the grid lines for anything artistic that you might be working on and have like a form that's going to be accessible for people.
Mhm.
But given that this was my first feature film, that really wasn't as big of a concern. And I was kind of figuring that out in the edit for a long time afterward because
Mhm.
my background and my collaborators' background, my producers and some of the co-stars in the movie, Hans Lam Barboza, Jerry Jensen, Jacob A. Miller. We were part of a sketch comedy group
Mhm.
called Headshot LLC for the longest time. And so when I approached this project, my thinking wasn't really clear cut in terms of genre. I approached it essentially with it being a crime story in mind, but my sensibilities are certainly comedic, as are my co-star, my primary co-star, Hans, and the same with the two producers who have smaller roles in the film. So it's just kind of like a natural given that, okay, whatever the subject matter is on this first one that we're going to do, it's probably going to be similar to what we're familiar with. And so that's where that fusion took place. And the subject matter is something that I drew from my hometown of Boston, because for several years there were actual disappearances, not dissimilar to what's in the movie, of primarily young college age men who would go missing in the same exact way around the same exact time about once a year. So, I don't really know if that answers your question, but that's where basically the merging of those different genres came from.
Yeah, it's interesting that it came so naturally for something like so tonally dark at times. Yeah, you were talking about, real life cases. What drew you to the smiley face murder theories, and how did you adapt that real world conspiracy crime into a narrative that can be disturbing but also entertaining for us?
Well, when those disappearances started happening in the Boston area, I was around that age. So it was naturally very fascinating for me to be there at that time. And unfortunately, one of my friends who I had gone to school with, one of his close friends wound up being one of these missing young men.
Oh,
And
wow.
so the subject matter there and the conversation around it was always very, very interesting to me. And it seems like there are different evolutions of that subject, of that topic, that I don't necessarily subscribe to. Like I don't
Mhm.
really believe personally in the smiley face killer theory. It sounds a little harebrained, delving into, all of these missing person cases that have occurred all across America.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I guess I've always had like a red flag up for at least like the local disappearances, since it was on a pretty reliable basis up until COVID. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of wanted to unpack that and just give like my own idea of maybe what could be like a reasoning for that. And that's where the story kind of came from.
Yeah, I didn't realize that that came from like a personal kind of like living around that, basically. Like that being in your sphere of life for your like growing up. Speaking of, time and sitting with stories here, this project, from my understanding, was filmed over almost 3 years, if I'm right, in multiple
Longer.
cities.
Yeah.
Longer than that? Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. How long actually was it, and how did the production evolve over that span, and what changed, what stayed true?
So I wrote the script in 2019
Oh,
and we began filming in March of 2020,
yeah.
literally right before
Oh
all of the
my gosh.
lockdowns happened. And so we're shooting during this time in Boston, and all of this is happening around us and nobody's really aware that, we're all basically going to be locked indoors for
Yeah.
well over a year. And it was just kind of like this. We weren't even treating it like a news story. Like we were so locked into shooting at the time. And it was a very small crew. It was
Mhm.
literally me, three other guys. And then we would have people coming and going, like freelancers, actors. It was a very small production to begin with. And then once we wrapped that initial leg of principal photography, everybody goes back home. And then it's like, okay, well, we're all on pause, I guess, for an indefinite period of time. And
Wow.
so my ability to shoot the movie and continue shooting the movie was very touch and go after that. And so we were shooting primarily in Boston. I came back to New York, was trying to figure out how I could arrange shoots wherever I could and with very limited amounts of people, limited locations available, and that slowed down the process. And then I had a version of the movie that was not done, but like close to done in 2021. And I was just like rewatching it. And it wasn't doing it for me. And I thought, okay, I think there's actually a much more amusing story to be told in this movie that is more the Rathke character and the Devlin character than it is the Rathke and Evans characters. And so we did a brief fundraiser in summer of 2021, raised some money, went and reshot a whole bunch, shot some new footage, recrafted the narrative. And then over like the next 2 or 3 years, I was basically fine tuning it like a person would a novel. Just like, all right, this scene doesn't work. Why don't I add in a new scene? All right, I'll just arrange a shoot this day, until it was basically something I was satisfied with. And I think the last shoot was January 2024.
Oh my
So
God.
yeah, it was a very long, arduous process, and like figuring it out in the edit was very stressful, antagonizing, mentally antagonizing at times. And I can say I'm not going to approach any project in the future with such like a freewheeling nature. You know.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I can understand with such a long process. Almost every filmmaker I've interviewed has said they absolutely hated the film, the first cut.
Yeah, it's so
Absolutely.
uncomfortable. It's horrible, especially if it's your face like every second in the movie. You
Oh
you
yeah.
do get numb to that in the edit, but then sitting down to watch it is like you're hitting the refresh button, and it's bad.
Yeah, it's a testament to your faith in the project to keep sitting through it and editing and tweaking it, absolutely. But I was also curious, you mentioned this a little bit before. Why was it important for you to cast members of your comedy group Headshot in such dramatically charged roles here?
Convenience primarily. People who work for free, handshake agreements of, yeah, I'll pay you when we sell the movie, I'll pay you back, don't worry about it, so that mainly. But also I knew that I would have chemistry with my lead there because we've been friends for 10 years. We met on tumblr.com
Oh
back when
wow.
that was still a thing. Same deal with the other two who I've known for not as lengthy a period of time, but for a good portion. Everybody got along very well, and I thought, okay, well, it's probably going to be easier to coach these guys and be able to help them convey what the vision is. And also I wrote the script with them in mind. So
Oh, perfect.
it was just a very natural, seamless situation.
Yeah, that's great. I was like, wow, this is, all of these people seem to have one thing in common when I was doing my research. Well, going more into the plot and the writing itself, as you are writer for this as well as director and actor, a lot of hats you wear here. The plot here centers around a private investigator manipulating a grieving mother, which is quite the setup, with a lot of moral ambiguity and grayness here. How did you want the audience to feel by Rafka by the end?
In my view, Rathke is like a pretty terrible guy. I thought it would be better to just kind of implement all of these, like, he's not a killer, right? He's not a serial killer. He's not that bad, but there's still a lot here where he's like a pretty inarguably terrible guy,
Yeah.
from just the way he handles his relationships to being a creep online, cyber stalking his girlfriend and like creating that situation. So I've always liked the idea of, okay, we have like a really terrible villain, right? And what if the hero, what if the protagonist here is somebody who's really just like a couple shades away from that? Does that impact your, who you want to get behind when you take in the story, when you watch what happens here? Does the humor of either character impact whether or not you want them to succeed in their mission or not, despite what it is they might be doing? So I like that. I'm drawn to nasty, bad, cowardly, morally dubious characters.
Yeah, I mean, first rule is keep them interesting over likable. So I definitely think you honored that. But, speaking of, I guess, critiquing or, showing things in, a certain light here, true crime in the last couple years has become kind of its own entertainment genre. Were you trying to critique that obsession or lean more into it or capitalize on people's fascination with it?
Well, I got to be honest with you. I know we established pretty well here that the story was inspired by true crime, but at no point did I really have like a perspective that this was a true crime story, even if it could be considered that. So I don't know. I wasn't really trying to critique it or anything. I think it is not like a good genre. I think it's become way too popular, and it's become this very cancerous thing in the culture. But no, I wasn't looking to do anything like that with the movie.
Oh, yeah, perfect. My other question, I guess, on writing here I have written down is, when you're dealing with so many themes and, genre play here, what was your through line to keep you grounded when you're writing this? And then, if that carried on to production too.
Well, when it came to writing, I'll tell you, I wrote an initial draft of the script, and it went through so many different changes as the production was going on. Like in 2021, I rewrote maybe a quarter to half of what the script was. And I wound up getting into a space of just like writing different scenes separately and piecing them in and seeing if I could remove certain elements. So, like, the writing process is not conventional or traditional whatsoever. And that's where a lot of my problems with getting a cut that I was satisfied with came from, is I completely mishandled that. So, like, any project in the future, we just shot a movie back in November, completely traditional. It's been a breeze by comparison. Like, this was a good lesson in, like, oh man, this is what you're not supposed to do, on the production side. And
Mm,
in terms of like a through line or tone, I really just wanted to make sure it didn't feel like a slog. I wanted to keep
mm,
it amusing or entertaining enough. And I would specifically look at the films of one particular Japanese director that I'm a big fan of, Takeshi Kitano, and how his movies just kind of groove with different genres, not dissimilarly to what you were saying before
mm.
with this. And his through line is always like, okay, it might be a comedy, it might be a Yakuza film, but I'm going to be like the tough guy. And I'm going to be like a bad guy. I'm going to make a bunch of cool shots, and we're going to make people laugh with the movie. And so, as long as I was like hitting some of those, I felt like, okay, this is going in the right direction. And we wound up in a spot with the movie where I'm pretty pleased with it. Everybody who has watched it has seemingly been impressed with it. So I don't know. I'm excited to finally get it out there, have people just form their own opinions about it, and see what that yields.
Yeah, amazing. I definitely think that you were able to successfully blend all of those together, even if the production process was a bit arduous.
Yeah.
But I'm sure, have you premiered the film yet?
So we had an international premiere in Seoul, South Korea for the Seoul Extreme Film Festival, and then it was also showcased in Rome for the
Mm,
Cinema Forciana Festival, which I won a Best Director for, which was cool. But
congrats.
this will be the domestic American premiere.
Amazing. Well, congratulations on your award you've won too. Thank you for giving me a reference that you've used for this film. I actually ask everybody, to recommend for people at home 4 movies that were like good references that they like to give them kind of a taste warming up, or if they've seen it after the festival and they're like, I want to see more kind of this style. It can be references you used, other projects you've done, kind of go crazy.
Okay, well, off of the note of the director that I referenced, Takeshi Kitano, the one movie that was so stuck in my mind when I was in production on this was Sonatine, to the point
Mm,
where I told my original composer, this went through such a long production, I wound up getting like a brand new composer way
wow.
deep into the process, but we used the original composer's music with his permission and everything. I told him, listen to this musician whose name is Joe Hishashi, I think. And
Yes,
yeah.
Ghibli.
Yes. Yeah. That's what he's known for now. But he worked on these Takashi Kitano films back in the early
Wow.
90s. And the theme from Sonatine was just like constantly playing in my head when I was writing the script, and then when I started piecing together the first assembly of the movie. And so I would have to recommend Sonatine, Hanabi. I would also say there's a really great comedy from Jody Hill called The Foot Fist Way, which was a big inspiration just in general for like the type of comedy that my guys and I wind up doing in our projects. And then I'll throw out my movie, which will hopefully be coming out maybe later this year or early next year. We'll see. Disorderly, which stars my co-star in this movie, Hans Lam. I'm not in this one. I just decided to stay behind the camera. So
Mm,
I think that one's going to be a blast.
awesome. Okay, thank you for giving us some awesome recs. I mentioned before that you wore a lot of hats. Did you find, being a director or actor or one role or the other more challenging for this film in particular? Did anything about the story change once you stepped into that on screen?
No, I don't think anything about the story changed, but it takes a long time for me to get comfortable with acting, with appearing on screen. Like I'm very naturally confident behind the camera and being able to compose shots or like direct people when I'm on a set. But then if I'm having to act in front of a group of people, and then I'm also like the director, I have to direct as well. Like you balancing these two things can be extremely difficult, and one will often impede upon the other. So it takes a lot of comfort and experience. And that was actually one thing that I think was to the benefit of the movie taking so long to make, is I gradually learned all of these processes so much better as I went along, and I could naturally get comfortable much faster. Acting would probably be it. I've acted in other people's movies and I've just like eaten it. I'm horrible in it, you know. So this was that was the most educational, I guess, for this
All
project.
right. Yeah, I mean, it's a learning process. But yeah, we've talked a lot about production mishaps, struggles, learning curves, all of that.
I know
Did
I'm
you
not really
have,
selling the movie right now, am I? I'm just saying this is hell to make. Yeah, no.
yeah, I was about to ask you, like, was there a moment that was like a win? We got this cut, we got this scene, we did it. I'm really proud of this.
Yeah, I think figuring out a way to keep it, because very early on, there was like a cut of the movie that I started previewing for the producers of the film that was like close to 3 hours long. And that was like, oh my God, we can't show a 3 hour cut of this. Are you kidding me? But getting it under 150 and developing the pacing that we did develop with the edit and the music that was licensed, and just like creating that vibe, creating that tone visually and everything else. When I presented the earliest version of the cut, that is the final cut, and
Wow.
seeing what the reaction was to that, that was a big win. That was a big, awesome, fantastic. Seeing it get picked up by festivals. It's like, okay, it's not just going to be us who can find something to enjoy about this movie. Actually, maybe it is good. And I think it is good. So I would say these little validations along the way that have been slow building into cool. I think this might be a success. And now that, following Athens, we're going to be screening the movie in different cities. And the first screening sold out in a day. So
Wow.
the excitement that's building around that, it's a lot. And I appreciate everybody who's been in my fan base, who's been waiting for like 5 years for this movie to come out, and to know that it's not going to have been a waste of the 5 years. Because a lot of people could say, so that's it? We waited that long,
No.
which has been like nagging in my brain, but I haven't gotten that yet. So fingers crossed it never arrives.
Gosh. Well, yeah, I'm so congratulations again. Like, it's
Thank you.
long deserved, absolutely. But I guess back to just another element I haven't touched on really. We have mentioned the soundtrack and like the music. I think on the website, is there like a soundtrack specific to this film that was made? What was the process of setting that up and collaborating?
I mean, honestly, one of my favorite things to do is to shoot a scene and then immediately set it to music. My
Yeah.
favorite movie, well, my current favorite movie is probably Husbands by John Cassavetes, but my favorite movie for the longest time was Train Spotting. If you watch
Mm,
Train Spotting, that movie is just pulsating with energy, and it's entirely because of the soundtrack. You remove the soundtrack, and it's a different film. And
mm,
so, approaching the film, there's always a big question of like, what is too much music? Should we have more breathing room here? And luckily, I know so many talented musicians. Like Mario Cuomo is the frontman of this band, the Orwells, and I've been a fan of them
mm.
since 2012. And
Wow.
I wound up becoming friends with him much later on. I directed one of his music videos. Getting his music into the film was a dream. And then going and like shooting him performing with his band during their reunion tour and featuring that in the film, even more so. Working with the original composer of the film, Kid Polaroid, very talented guy. He's gone on to work on like real Hollywood productions, which is why he had to step away from this one.
Wow.
But working with the second composer on the film, Jake Fields, Grammy nominated guy, very talented. I think he kind of, I have to give him so much credit in building the character of the movie with his sound, because that's like 95% of what you're hearing in the movie. And then acquiring tracks from like Lil Soda Boy or, just several different smaller but very distinct artists. It's a fun process to be able to form that soundtrack and lay it out in the film.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I think, the sound really is half the story in a lot of ways for most films. It carries so much. Probably for me, it's like the 2011 Tron with the Daft Punk soundtrack. I'm like, that
Oh
movie
yeah.
would be nothing without them.
Yeah.
So I totally I feel that. It really does make it. I know I've already sort of touched on this, but I like to kind of finish out with a question like this. If the film leaves viewers with one sentiment or a thought in particular at the end when the credits roll, what do you think it should be?
Good question. Very good question. I'm okay with them coming away with any real thought. I'm just concerned with, I want them to be entertained, and I want them to have been amused, and I want them to feel like, that was a good hour and 48 minutes that I spent here. I'm not really trying to convey any sort of message with the film, or have them take away anything that wouldn't be naturally occurring or organically forming based off of their experience with the movie. I just hope they feel it's a worthwhile time.
Absolutely. And I know that it will be.
Amazing.
But thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking. Where can people find more about you and your projects in the future?
So on Instagram, I go by Low Res Wonder Bread. Same thing with my YouTube channel. That's updated about once or twice a week with my show. I host a podcast called Movies with my main co-star in the film, where we talk about movies. Yeah, there's also a Mass State Lottery Instagram page where we update that daily. We're trying to find some new venues to show the movie in different cities that we haven't covered already. So also check out ForgottenGenres.com, because that is like the all-encapsulating news aggregator website for everything that I'm working.
Amazing. We're so happy to have the film domestic premiere here, and we're totally excited for everything else you got going on in the future. So be sure to check that out. For everyone watching at home, State Lottery will be showing at the Athens Film Fest from August 14th through 17th, and tickets are on sale now at athensfilm.com. Jay, thank you so much for sitting down with me for this interview.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure.